And I am telling you, I do not care what that bloke at the bar thinks. And I certainly don't care what you think. It was 1922, no wait, 1923, and it completely fundamentally redefined how we even look at a screen. Mind your pint, mate. You're going to knock it over if you keep waving your hands about like that.
Are you joking? I can barely hear myself think over the absolute racket in this place, and you're sitting here screaming about a film that is, frankly, a bit overhyped, and you're just buying into this ridiculous marketing.
You are not going to believe the absolute nonsense my colleague is spouting today. You listening to this, yes, you. You're going to have to be the referee here, because I am gobsmacked. I am sitting here trying to have a civilized pint, holding in my hands what is basically a treasure map, and I'm getting nothing but grief for it.
A treasure map.
Cinema, the magic vehicle, a comprehensive guide. Journey 1, 1913 to 1950.
And it is, frankly, absolutely brilliant. It is a proper, meticulous guide to uncovering the golden age of film, these silent masterpieces,
Yeah.
The works that actually shaped the medium before it all just became CGI explosions and men in spandex punching each other.
It is a shambles. It is a complete and utter editorial shambles. Look at the cover. Just look at the front of the physical book you are holding right now.
I am looking at it.
You're treating it like it's the Rosetta Stone, but the publisher couldn't even organize a piss-up in a brewery.
Oh, come off it. It promises an extraordinary journey into the very DNA of the moving image.
Read the subtitle. Go on. Read it out loud for the referee. Let's hear the meticulous research.
It says a comprehensive guide, Journey 1, 1913-1950.
Right. 1913 to 1950. Clear as day. Now, carefully flip your glorious treasure map over and read the blurb on the back, the one you've been quoting at me nonstop since we walked in here.
This remarkable book is filled with the most inspiring descriptions of the greatest films spanning the years 1913 to 1981.
Exactly. 1981. So which is it? Is it 1950 or 1981? The publisher couldn't even be bothered to proofread the back cover to match the front, and you're treating this text like it's some infallible sacred gospel of film history.
It's a minor typo.
It sounds like a promotional pamphlet slapped together on a Friday afternoon by an intern who just wanted to get to the pub early. Open your eyes and heart to the wonders that await you. Please. It's dodgy. It's incredibly dodgy, mate.
So they made a tiny typo on the dust jacket that doesn't invalidate the actual meticulously researched content inside the book. The book is exactly what it says. It is a magic vehicle.
A magic vehicle. I can't believe you're saying that with a straight face.
It's a time travel experience. It's giving us a lens into a period of cinema that people just completely ignore today because they're too busy watching the 15th reboot of the same modern rubbish. You don't throw out a treasure map just because someone misspelled island on the envelope.
If the map maker can't spell island, I'm not trusting them to find the gold.
But fine, we are not going to get bogged down in a publisher's typo. We are going to talk about the actual meat of the argument. We're going to talk about the specific film in here that proves my point. We're talking about John Epstein's 1923 French silent film, Faithful Heart.
Right. The masterpiece.
Or Cœur Fidèle, if we're being precise. Because the description of this film, the techniques they use, the sheer physical and artistic innovation, I mean, it is proper genius. It just is.
Genius. I reckon rather dull is a much better description. Dull and honestly highly dodgy in places. You're taking a completely average melodrama and you're just elevating it because it happens to be old and French.
Wait. You haven't even, let me explain the context. To even begin to understand why this film is a masterpiece, you have to understand how we are meant to be looking at it. Look at this note here in the text. There's this image of a magnifying glass.
Oh, here we go with the metaphors. I knew it. If the film was actually good, you wouldn't need a metaphor to defend it.
Hear me out. The magnifying glass is exactly the tool we need for early 1920s cinema. You cannot just glance at a 1923 silent film with modern passive eyes.
Passive eyes.
Yes. When you watch a modern film, you just sit back, you eat your popcorn, and you let the movie wash over you because it tells you exactly what to feel with the loud music and the fast dialogue and the bright colors. You can't do that here. You need the magnifying glass to look incredibly closely at the details.
So you have to do all the work because the film is too boring to hold your attention.
No, you have to actively search for the subtle camera movements, the shading, the way the actors physically position their bodies in the frame. That is how you find the uncharted cinematic treasures this guidebook is talking about. And when you put the magnifying glass on Gene Epstein, the bloke who actually directed it, I mean, his pedigree is mental.
His pedigree. He was 25 years old. He wasn't a seasoned master of the craft. He was a kid playing with a very expensive new toy.
Exactly. Born in Warsaw in 1897. By the time he is 25, he has hit full artistic maturity. Think about what you were doing at 25.
I was drinking in a tub very much like this one.
Exactly. I was certainly not revolutionizing a global art form. But according to the historical record laid out here, he had been in the cinema industry for less than 2 years. 2 years.
According to the highly questionable book you're clutching like a lifeline.
2 years, and he already had a comprehensive command of the entire craft. He was acquainted with all the major achievements of the medium. He worked as an assistant to the great Louis Deluc, who we will absolutely get to, by the way, because he is vital to this whole thing.
Oh, I'm sure he is.
But Epstein's first film, Pasteur, which he made in 1922, was already blowing people away with its inventive use of different camera viewpoints. He was a boy wonder. He was soaking up cinematic techniques like an absolute sponge.
Hold on a second. Boy wonder. That is a massively generous interpretation of what this text actually says. Let me point out a glaring red flag right here in your brilliant guidebook, right under your precious magnifying glass.
What?
It says, and I quote directly, that the script for Faithful Heart was reportedly written in a single night.
Yes. A burst of pure, unfiltered inspiration.
That's rubbish, mate. Writing a script in one night doesn't make you a genius. It means you couldn't be bothered to revise. It means the script is going to be a bloody mess.
That is such a cynical way to look at art.
Think about the actual mechanics of writing a film. You don't write a meticulously paced, emotionally resonant classical tragedy in 8 hours while drinking espresso in a Parisian flat. You write a rushed, structural disaster. You write the first thing that comes into your head, which is usually a massive cliche.
You are looking at this like an accountant. You're thinking about modern screenplays with their strict formatting and their rigid 3-act structures and studio notes.
I'm thinking about basic storytelling.
In 1923, a script wasn't a 100-page document with every line of dialogue mapped out perfectly. It was a scenario. It was a shot list. It was a vision. Think of it like a jazz musician.
A jazz musician. We're bringing jazz into this now.
Yes. Sometimes a jazz musician steps up to the saxophone, closes their eyes, and improvises a perfect solo. It just flows out of them. Epstein had absorbed the entire cinematic language of his era in those 2 intense years under Deluc, and it poured out of him onto the page in one night. He didn't need to revise because the emotional core was so incredibly strong. It was unfiltered, raw cinema.
Unfiltered, raw cinema, right. Well, let's look at this perfect solo of a plot he hastily scribbled down in his pajamas, shall we? Because if that script was written in a single night, it absolutely shows in the story. It is the most paint-by-numbers rubbish you could possibly imagine.
The story is a gripping, fatalistic melodrama set in the Vieux-Port, the old port of Marseille. And let me paint a picture for you, because you really have to understand the setting to get the film.
Paint away.
The Vieux-Port in 1923 wasn't some lovely tourist trap with yachts and expensive cafes where you buy overpriced croissants. It was the gritty, grimy, industrial heart of the Mediterranean. It was a place of drifters, sailors, poverty, and desperation. It is gritty, it is real, and the film perfectly captures that oppressive atmosphere.
You can't be serious. It is pure soap opera nonsense superimposed over a dirty dock. Let's just walk through this gripping narrative that he's supposedly pulled from the ether in a single night.
It's an archetypal setup.
We have a love triangle. Groundbreaking. Truly, no one had ever thought of a love triangle before 1923. We have Marie, a downtrodden waitress, played by Gina Menes. We have Jean, an honest, hardworking dock worker, played by Léa Mathot. And we have Paul, a petty, mustache-twirling villain, played by Edmund Van Dale.
You start with recognizable archetypes so you can subvert them with the visual storytelling. That's the whole point.
It is a cliche. Let's continue with the dodgy events that unfold in this brilliant scenario. Paul wins Marie. Not through romance, not through charm, but through sheer threats. He basically bullies her into being with him.
Which establishes the grim reality of the Marseille waterfront. It establishes that this is a world where brute force wins, where the innocents are crushed by the cynical. It's fatalism, mate.
Then there is a knife fight. Because, of course, there's a knife fight in a waterfront pub. It's practically mandatory. Paul, being the two-dimensional cartoon villain that he is, cowardly flees the scene when things get rough.
He's a survivor in a brutal world.
He's a coward. And Jean, our quote-unquote honest worker, gets arrested and thrown in jail. So Paul just gets Marie by default, like she's a prize at a fun fair, and he immediately turns into a permanently drunken abuser who mistreats her and her child for years while Jean is locked up.
It's tragic.
This isn't high art. This is a penny dreadful. This is the kind of cheap, manipulative plotting you use when you only have one night to write a script, and you need to hit every obvious emotional button to keep the audience awake. Look, a bad man is hitting a woman, feels sad, it's lazy.
You are completely missing the point of what a melodrama was in the 1920s. Yes, it is a melodrama. I am not denying that. The source text explicitly calls it a melodrama. But it defends it. It says it's firmly based in folk tradition.
Folk tradition is just an academic excuse for predictable. It's what film critics say when they're embarrassed that a famous director made a soap opera.
No, listen to the actual analysis. Use that magnifying glass we talked about. The text argues that Epstein took this basic, recognizable framework, and he eliminated the trivial and banal situations.
Eliminated the trivial situations by having a knife fight in a pub.
He took a standard melodrama, the kind of thing audiences were used to seeing churned out every single week, and he stripped away the fluff. He didn't focus on the intricate, boring details of how Jean got arrested or the boring legal proceedings. He focused so intensely on the raw emotion, the claustrophobia of the port, and the visual storytelling that he elevated the genre to the status of classical tragedy. It's like taking a cheap pop song and playing it like a symphony.
Classical tragedy. You're comparing a drunken thug running away from a knife fight in a waterfront cafe to Sophocles. Are you comparing a woman trapped with an alcoholic dock worker to Oedipus Rex?
Look at the climax. Just look at how it resolves, because this is where the fatalism really kicks in and elevates it.
Oh, the climax. Yes, let's talk about that masterpiece of writing.
Jean is finally released from jail after serving his time. He comes back to the port. He finds Marie and her child, who have been suffering miserably under this absolute tyrant, Paul. He cares for them. He steps up like a proper hero. He is trying to restore order to this chaotic, cruel world.
Right.
And then Paul attacks him again. They have another fight.
Right.
But this time, Jean is actually losing. The honest man, the hero who did his time and tried to do the right thing, is about to be physically beaten and defeated by the villain.
And then what happens? Go on, tell the referee what happens next in this classical tragedy.
At the very last moment, when all hope seems entirely lost, an invalid girl neighbor, who is played by the director's sister, Marie Epstein, by the way, shoots Paul dead.
Exactly. A literal deus ex machina. An invalid girl from next door just happens to have a loaded gun, just happens to see the fight at the exact right moment, and shoots the bad guy dead, just as the hero is losing.
It's unexpected.
That is a cheap, ridiculous resolution. It is the absolute definition of a contrived, one-night script ending. He wrote himself into a physical corner where the hero is losing, and he looked at his watch and thought, right, I need to go to bed, let's just have the sister shoot him. Bang, credits roll.
It is not a cheap resolution. It is poetic justice. It is the ultimate expression of fatalism. You have to understand the mood of Europe in 1923.
Oh, here we go with the historical mood.
They had just come out of the First World War. Millions were dead. The idea that the good guy always wins through hard work and honesty was completely dead in the water. Epstein is showing that the universe has to step in to crush the abuser when the honest man can't do it alone.
By using a random neighbor with a gun.
The invalid girl represents the crushed, marginalized people of the port finally snapping back. It's absolutely brilliant, and it perfectly fits the overcast, doomed atmosphere of the entire film. You're evaluating the plot like it's some modern police procedural where every clue has to line up logically, but the genius of Epstein isn't just what happens in the plot, it's how it happens on the screen.
So we're ignoring the terrible plot to focus on the pretty pictures.
It's the atmosphere. To understand why this film actually matters, we have to look past the script and compare Epstein to his peers in the 1920s French Impressionist scene.
Oh, right, the Impressionists. Marcel Herbier, Louis Deluc, and our boy wonder, Jean Epstein. The holy trinity of pointing a camera at a puddle and calling it a profound statement on the human condition.
They were pioneers. And what the guidebook tells us is that these directors usually treated the psychology of their protagonist with what they call poetic license.
Right, poetic license.
They were constantly escaping from the grim reality of the post-war world into the world of dreams.
Let's translate poetic license, shall we? For anyone who doesn't speak fluent film critic, it means they didn't know how to write realistic human beings, so they just had their actors stare off into space looking incredibly sad while they did fancy camera tricks.
It means they were exploring what the medium of film could actually do. Before this, movies were basically just filmed stage plays. You put a camera on a heavy wooden tripod, the actors stood in a line, and they just acted out a play.
It worked perfectly well.
But the French Impressionists said, no, this is a new art form. We can show what a dream looks like. We can show what memory looks like. They were fascinated by people on the social margins. Waterfront cafes, provincial fairgrounds, vagabonds. They loved stories of faraway journeys, nostalgia, hopeless love. That was the whole vibe of the movement.
Sounds depressing.
And the prime example of this is Louis Deluc's film Fièvre from 1921.
I am looking at the notes on Fièvre right now.
The source describes Fièvre as an ephemeral drama of frustration and passion set entirely in a Marseille waterfront bar. It was a massive hit among the avant-garde.
Exactly. So Epstein didn't even come up with his own setting. He just nicked Deluc's setting.
He didn't nick it.
Let's review the timeline. He was Deluc's assistant. He stood there on set, watching Deluc make a groundbreaking film in a Marseille bar in 1921. And 2 years later, he thought, I know what will make me a genius. I'll do exactly the same thing, set it in exactly the same place, but I'll write the script in one night, make the bad guy a cartoon, and throw in a magical shooting neighbor.
Wait, hear me out, because you are missing the crucial evolution here. The text makes a massive distinction between Deluc and Epstein, and this is the absolute core of why Faithful Heart is a masterpiece.
Go on then, enlighten me.
It says that in Faithful Heart, the viewport of Marseille is not shown symbolically. Deluc used the waterfront setting as a symbol, an ephemeral dreamscape. It was soggy, it was mythical, but Epstein took that exact same setting and showed it in full realist complexity.
Realist complexity. With a permanently drunken, mustache-twirling villain and a completely random assassination by an invalid neighbor.
Right.
Very realistic. Happens down at my local all the time.
Visually, it is visually realist. Try to separate the narrative structure from the visual execution for a second. The text explicitly states that Epstein's film is not a voyage into the land of imagination like Deluc's was.
Could have fooled me.
It is a blend of social commentary and non-stereotyped melodrama. Yes, there are minor expressionist notes, moments of exaggerated shadow or distorted perspective, but they are not dominant. Realism dominates. Epstein actually went down to the dirt and the grime of the real streets.
He filmed her.
He showed the actual sweat on the dock workers, the actual filth of the taverns. He grounded the impressionist dream in documentary-like reality.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you are trying to argue that he is blending the grim reality of documentary filmmaking with the dreamlike state of Impressionism. But how does that actually translate to the screen? Because reading this text, it sounds like he's just throwing every single stylistic trick at the wall to see what sticks, mostly to cover up the fact that his actors were absolutely terrible.
The actors weren't terrible.
The text literally says he did not handle the fatalistic and tearful posturing of the two main actors well. Posturing. It calls their performance posturing.
Well, the style of the time.
That means they were overacting their socks off, weeping and wailing, and he didn't know how to direct them to act like normal humans. He was too busy looking at his camera.
Fine, I will concede that the acting might have been a bit melodramatic for modern tastes. Acting in 1923 was still shaking off the theatrical traditions of the 19th century. But that's exactly why we have the magnifying glass.
Oh, the magnifying glass is back.
We are looking past the 1920s acting style, and we are looking at the camera, the canvas and the camera, because this is where the real genius lies. Let's talk about the painters, because the source brings up some absolute heavy hitters to explain what Epstein was actually doing visually.
Yes, trying to bring some desperate academic rigor to this shambles. The text mentions the foundational painters, Claude Monet.
Think about Monet. He wasn't just painting pretty pictures of his garden and some water lilies. He was obsessing over light.
Light and water, yes.
He would sit by his pond and try to capture how the sunlight changed second by second, how the reflection of the water actually shifted. He was trying to capture time.
Right, and Pierre-Auguste Renoir, celebrating feminine sensuality, the warmth of human skin, and Paul Cézanne.
Cézanne, the master of design, color, and composition, whose work literally bridged late 19th century Impressionism and the harsh geometric reality of early 20th century Cubism. These are the absolute giants of visual art.
I'm not denying they're giants.
And the text says that French Impressionist cinema aimed to recreate on the silver screen the ever-fluid world of those exact painters. They wanted to take a Monet painting and make it move.
Which is a lovely romantic thought, but there is a fundamental flaw in the logic. Paint is static. Film moves. You can't just slap a painting on a screen and call it cinema.
Exactly. And that is exactly where Epstein's genius comes in. How do you make paint move?
By turning the crank on the camera?
The text points out that Impressionist cinema preferred movement over immobility. They saw reality as a sequence of brief spells of action. They wanted the fluidity of Monet's water lilies, but they understood that film requires motion. And Epstein was absolutely fascinated, borderline obsessed by movement.
He was obsessed with dizzying the audience, more like.
He wanted to capture the kinetic energy of life, which leads us to the most mental, absolutely breathtaking scene in the entire film. the merry-go-round scene.
Oh, the famous amusement park gimmick. Here we go.
It is not a gimmick. Listen to this, right? The film has a key scene set in an amusement park, a provincial fairground. Jean and Marie are there. And a normal director in 1923, a sane director, would take their massive, heavy wooden and brass hand-cranked camera, bolt it to a heavy wooden tripod, set it 20 feet back, and just film the actors riding the merry-go-round from a safe distance.
Like a normal person.
Like you're watching a play.
Yeah.
But Epstein didn't do that.
No, because he was a 25-year-old show-off.
He took this heavy, cumbersome, fragile piece of machinery and he physically strapped it inside the revolving merry-go-round.
I'm sure the health and safety people love that.
He mounted it onto the ride itself, right up in the actors' faces, while the thing is spinning at full speed.
Which, I'll admit, is mildly interesting from a purely technical standpoint for 1923. It'd probably take a fair bit of rigging and some very thick ropes.
Mildly interesting. It's revolutionary. Think about the physical danger, the sheer logistical nightmare of doing that with 1920s technology. But the result is visceral. Every single frame is used to create the sensation of frantic whirling.
It creates nausea, is what it creates.
When you watch it, the background is just this dizzying, violent blur of lights and shapes, while the actors are sharp and in focus in the foreground. It allows the viewer to almost experience the exhilarating, nauseating ride themselves.
So he made a theme park ride, not a film.
When you watch a modern action sequence, right, like a car chase in a Bourne film, where the camera is strapped to the hood of the car and you feel the bumps and the speed, that feeling of being physically dragged into the space of the film, you are looking at the exact DNA of what Epstein invented on that merry-go-round.
That's a massive stretch.
He broke the fourth wall of the screen and dragged the audience into the physical space of the characters.
It's formal experimentation, mate. It's a bloke with a camera spinning in circles going, look what I can do.
Now, it serves the emotional core of the scene.
The text even admits it later if you bother to read the criticisms instead of just the glowing praise. It says he is too fond of formal experimentation. Let's translate that for the referee. Formalism is when a director cares more about the fancy camera tricks, the shiny toys of the medium, than they do about the actual human story.
He wasn't ignoring the story.
They get distracted by how cool a spinning shot looks, and they completely forget they're supposed to be telling a coherent story about human beings.
He didn't forget. The text says he was the best French film director of the 1920s, precisely because he was able to combine the story with visual and narrative experiments while evading the traps of formalism. He walked the tightrope.
Evading the traps of formalism. The text literally says, in black and white, that he alternates too abruptly between objective and subjective narrative. That is the exact literal trap of formalism.
It's a bold stylistic choice.
That is a director who doesn't know if he wants to show the audience what is actually happening in the physical room, the objective reality, or what is happening inside the character's crazy, dizzy head, the subjective reality.
Why not both?
So instead of choosing, he just violently smashes them together, cutting back and forth abruptly, and hopes it looks artistic instead of just confusing.
He synthesized the masters. He was showing both the reality of the port and the internal trauma of the characters simultaneously. He didn't just invent in a vacuum. He took the best parts of everyone around him and wove them together.
And nicked them, you mean?
Look at the list of achievements he incorporated. He took Marcel L'Herbier's subjective narrative, showing the world through the character's eyes. He took L'Herbier's use of returns to the past, soft focus shots to make things look dreamy, and superimpositions.
Right.
He took the incredibly advanced, rapid-fire editing techniques of the Americans like D.W. Griffith and the French epic director Abel Gance. And he combined all of that with the poetic touch of his mentor, Louis Deluc.
Spot on about him stealing everyone's tricks. He's a magpie, a cinematic Frankenstein of techniques.
He's synthesizing.
He took Griffith's fast cuts, Deluc's dirty waterfront setting, L'Herbier's blurry, soft focus, stitched it all together with some spit and a spinning camera, and you call it a masterpiece of original genius.
I call it the evolution of cinema. That is how art progresses. No one invents entirely from scratch. And here's the absolute kicker, the thing that proves his mastery beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Oh, there's a kicker now.
Because of his incredibly precise visual descriptions, because of his ability to tell the story entirely through dynamic images and editing, he was able to completely dispense with screen titles.
Dispense with them entirely.
Yes, mostly. Think about how massive that is. For a silent film in 1923, the standard practice was to show an actor making a face, then cut to a black card with white text explaining what they were feeling or saying, then cut back to the actor.
It was necessary. They couldn't speak.
but it constantly interrupted the flow of the action. Trying to tell a complex, emotional story without title cards in 1923 is like trying to write a hip-hop song without using a single lyric. You have to make the instruments, or in this case the lighting, the editing, the camera angles, do all of the emotional heavy lifting.
If the actors weren't just posturing, maybe they could have helped.
It means the visual language was so strong, so perfectly constructed, that the images did all the talking.
Right. Let's look at those perfectly constructed images then. Let's really use that magnifying glass of yours on the visual language. Let's look at the intimidation scene.
Ah, yes, the intimidation scene.
The text highlights this as the most memorable dynamic situation in the whole film. Jean, our honest worker, is being intimidated by Paul and his gang of dockside thugs.
It is a brilliant, tense scene. You can practically feel the claustrophobia.
Let's read exactly how he executes this brilliance. The text says, rhythmic takes from different camera angles convey the sense of movement and emotion.
Exactly. Fast cuts.
Fine. Standard editing. He cuts quickly between the faces to build tension. But then, to create what the text calls a reflective mood, what does Epstein do? How does he show us the deep internal tragedy of the scene? He uses placid, double-exposed general shots.
Yes, rolling waves superimposed on a girl's face. It's beautiful.
Whirling waves. On a face, you cannot possibly defend that as high art. That is the absolute definition of cliché poetic license.
It wasn't a cliche then.
Let's explain the physical mechanics of this genius for the referee. He takes the film strip, he shoots a close-up of the actress looking sad, then he literally rewinds the physical film strip inside the camera, goes down to the beach, and exposes the exact same piece of film again, this time shooting the ocean.
It's an in-camera effect. It's incredibly difficult to get the exposure right.
So you get a ghostly image of the sea overlapping her face. Oh, the character's feeling turbulent, sad emotions. Let's literally project a picture of the turbulent, sad ocean onto her forehead. It is incredibly heavy-handed. It is exactly the kind of tearful posturing the text criticizes. It's a student film trick.
It wasn't a cliche in 1923. He was inventing the visual vocabulary. You're looking at it backward from 100 years later, having seen 1 million student films copy it and saying it looks old.
It looks silly.
Of course it looks old. He's the one who invented the trope.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just turbulent waves to mean sadness. The text specifically calls them placid, double-exposed shots to create a reflective mood. The contrast is what matters.
Contrast between, what, the waves and her nose.
The violent intimidation of Jean by the gang is intercut with these slow, placid waves on Marie's face. It shows the internal tragedy. It shows that while Jean is physically trapped in the room by the gang of thugs, Marie is emotionally trapped by the slow, inevitable tide of fate.
The tide of fate. You should write for the publisher. You'd fit right in with the magic vehicle nonsense.
And it is that exact feeling, that creeping fatalism, that cemented Epstein's legacy and changed French cinema forever.
Ah, right. The legacy. Here we go.
The legacy. The text is very clear on this. These stylistic devices, the overcast skies, the puddles in the port glistening in the cold light of dawn, they didn't just disappear when the film ended. They presaged the legendary, fatalistic French films of the 1930s.
Presaged. That's a very strong word.
The poetic realism of directors like Marcel Carné and Jean Renoir, the entire tone of French cinema for the next decade, that doomed, beautiful, tragic atmosphere, was built on the foundation Epstein laid in this 1990-meter film from Pathé Cinema.
He filmed some dirty puddles and some gray clouds in Marseille, and suddenly he gets credit for an entire decade of French filmmaking that came after him. It's quite a leap.
He had the ability to think with the camera. That is the exact phrase used in the book. He didn't just point and shoot. He used the camera as an active participant in the story.
Actively spinning in circles, yes.
He firmly anchored this picture in the real world. Realistic portrayal of the Marseille streets, combined with effective, emotional storytelling. This is exactly what the guidebook, Cinema, the Magic Vehicle, promises.
I was wondering when we'd get back to the Magic Vehicle.
It's an opportunity to see the DNA of modern film. It's a guide to uncovering countless cinematic treasures that explain why movies look the way they do today. People need to read this book. They need to seek out these classical films, and they need to understand the roots of the art form.
Instead of what?
Instead of just passively consuming empty, green-screened modern remakes where the computer does all the work and the camera just sits there.
That's rubbish. You don't need a magic vehicle to see a bloke with a camera spinning on a merry-go-round and superimposing ocean waves onto a woman's face like a bad perfume commercial.
You're being deliberately obtuse.
The book sounds like a promotional pamphlet, desperately trying to sell a romanticized, overly academic version of history. And the film itself sounds exactly like what it is, a 25-year-old kid showing off.
That is entirely unfair.
He took a basic melodramatic soap opera, threw every single camera trick he nicked from his boss at it, and wrapped it up with a magical shooting neighbor because he had to finish the script before breakfast.
You are completely ignoring the historical context.
Yeah.
You are ignoring the realist complexity and the sheer physical innovation of what he achieved with early technology.
I am ignoring nothing. I am reading the exact text you provided. I am just reading it without the rose-tinted glasses.
You're cherry-picking the criticisms and completely ignoring the overwhelming praise. He elevated a common genre to classical tragedy.
A drunken thug running away from a knife fight in a pub is not Sophocles.
All right, look, you listening to us right now, you're going to have to decide for yourself.
Yes, referee, make your call.
Are you going to trust a cynic who dismisses the entire foundational movement of French Impressionist cinema because of a typo on a dust jacket and a stubborn refusal to understand metaphor?
It's not a refusal, it's a rejection of nonsense.
Or are you going to actually dive into the history of cinema, look past the 1920s acting, and see the magic vehicle for yourself?
Think about this, referee, before you make your call. Think about the core claim of this book.
Here we go.
If a quote-unquote masterpiece has to explicitly eliminate trivial and banal situations to be taken seriously as art, as the text proudly claims, doesn't that just mean the director was completely incapable of finding art, beauty, or tragedy in actual, everyday human life?
You can't be serious.